Hey guys, excited worm here to share some exciting news with y'all. Just earlier today, we've got the season 20 weapon tuning preview going on right here. This is from Chris Proctor, the senior design lead. Okay, I'm gonna skip kind of the formalities here. Let's start with weapon archetypes. First thing to note here is that when playing on console, your reticle will turn red when it's over an enemy that is inside your weapon's effective range. And basically, just talk about it's a visual aid to help players. They're now adding it to PC. So whatever on that change, but here we go. Here's a big one: linear fusion rifles. Now we all knew it was coming, and Bungie says so right here. You probably saw this coming. Linear fusion rifles outperform outperform other heavy weapons for boss damage by a wide margin and have had plenty of time in the sun. We're bringing them down enough for other options to compete. At the same time, exotic heavy linear fusion rifles don't do enough justice over using a legendary. So they're not affected by this nerf. So first of all, reduce damage versus champions, mini bosses, bosses, and vehicles by 15%. That is a pretty substantial margin, and I think that's definitely going to rein in people's usage of linear fusions. Of course, Sleeper Simulant and Queenbreaker are unaffected. This is about to turn Sleeper into an absolute freaking beast. Okay, it's already very good, the best linear fusion in the game. Now it's going to be way on top. Moving on here, machine guns. Machine guns have been buffed a few times over the past year or so, but only in PvE. We've opted to increase their damage a little, which makes them more forgiving to use in PvP. This buff also applies across the board in PvE. PvP damage is typically the base, and PvE has multipliers on top of that. We're also substantially increasing machine gun reserves, giving them higher uptime, particularly useful in hard content. Okay, that's a big deal. We'll talk about it in just a moment. But increased damage by 10%, about 10%, with the following effects on time to kill against a Guardian with tier 6 resilience. High impact frame, TTK reduced from 0.67 to 0.5. Rapid fire frame, TTK reduced from 0.53 to 0.47. And adaptive frame, this is your 450s. Importantly, TTK is unchanged at 0.53. So keep that in mind. Also, increase ammo reserve by 50% at a 0 inventory stat and 20% at a 100 stat. Note, inventory stat is a 0 to 100 value behind the scenes. This is presented as the actual number of rounds in game, but you can take this to mean that lower reserve machine guns get a big boost, while large reserve machine guns get a smaller one. So I think yeah, basically the bigger your machine guns reserves are, the smaller, the closer it's going to be to this 20%, and then the smaller that your machine gun reserves are is going to be closer to that 50%. That's a big change for machine guns. Hopefully we'll see a lot more play with them in PvE, especially in in-game content. I think the big thing here is the reserve ammo. I'm thinking like Thunderlord might be moving into a pretty good spot. Also, the Xenophage, I think could also be moving up into a good spot here because Xenophage already does a lot of damage. And if it's actually getting an increase in damage here, Xenophage might be the play. Moving on, heavy grenade launchers. Heavy grenade launchers haven't been touched in a while and are substantially below some other heavy options for damage. On top of that, grenade launcher projectiles have travel time, a ballistic arc, and relatively small blast radius. Yes, they do. So it can be very hard to consistently land shots on a moving target, and they may hit fewer targets with the explosion than you would expect. With this change, heavy grenade launchers would be should be significantly more useful in PvE and easier to use in both PvE and PvP. All right, increase damage versus champions, mini bosses, boss, and vehicles by 20%. Oh my goodness, 20%, and miners by 40. I mean, I think the 20% buff against mini bosses and bosses that's pretty big. Miners at 40%. Personally, I think most miners die pretty quickly to grenade launchers anyways, and I don't really think people use grenade launchers against minor enemies. At any rate, improved projectile collision, making it slightly easier to land hits. Thank God. Increased blast radius by 1 meter. And then Parasite is unaffected. That's a shame. However, kind of makes sense. It does insane damage as is. Shotguns. The new shotgun reticle shows the correct spread pattern, but in its shipping form, the size of the reticle wasn't affected by the current spread angle, which will change if you jump or with magazine options like smoothbore. This change should make the reticle accurate in most ways at 85-degree field of view, FOV. A change to make this accurate for all FOV options will come in a future season. So shotgun reticles now change in size proportional to spread angle. That's, I mean, no damage, nothing, no damage perks, anything, no damage buffs or nerfs, anything right here. This is just a visual change, it looks like. Related note, the Legend of Acra's hipfire reticle is now a bit more representative of its very large spread angle. Okay. Kinetic weapons. Okay, here we go. Kinetic weapons. I'm excited for this one. Kinetic slot weapons have always done 5% more damage versus unshielded targets in PvE. This meant that kinetic slot stasis weapons were straight up better with extra functionality and no downside. We wanted to give players more of a reason to run kinetic damage type weapons. So instead of a blanket kinetic slot damage boost, we're switching to a kinetic damage type boost based on whether your kinetic weapon uses primary or special ammo, and increase the bonus significantly. All right, here we go. Kinetic primary weapon damage multiplier increase from 1.05 to 1.1. Okay, so it looks like we are going to be doing 10% more damage, is what that means, against enemies, which is a substantial buff. Kinetic special weapon damage multiplier increase from 1.05 to 1.15, which is a massive 15% additional damage, 15% more damage over your energy shotguns, stuff like that. Kinetic slot stasis weapons no longer have the 5% damage bonus versus unshielded targets in PvE, which to me, what that basically means is stasis weapon damage decreased from 1.05 to 1.0. There's also a kinetic damage type perk coming in Lightfall. This one's exciting here. So kinetic weapons are going to have a unique perk similar to Repulsor Brace, Volt Shot, Incandescent, Headstone. That's exciting. Okay, exotics. Just like many players, we've wanted exotics weapons that have a strong theming around their damage types to use the real subclass 3.0 verbs. And Lightfall's longer development and playtest cycle gave us the opportunity to add subclass verbs to many of the top picks. Our goal with adding subclass 3.0 verbs is to grant these weapons additional functionality and let them tie into subclass builds in a more meaningful way. In most cases, this is also, or is paired with, a hefty buff. All right, so let's get into the exotic buffs. The Queenbreaker. Okay, Queenbreaker, here we go. The Queenbreaker's blinding effect was underwhelming for a heavy weapon, so we've changed how that's deployed. Notes that Queenbreaker was also not affected by the global damage reduction to linear fusion rifles, making it substantially stronger by comparison. Okay, shot now chains to nearby enemies and uses Arc 3.0 blinds. Ooh, so does this mean that Queenbreaker is basically getting Volt Shot built into every shot? Interesting. Okay, Ruinous Effigy feels very voidy, and slamming the Transmutation Sphere was an obvious place to put an additional effect. Transmutation Spear Slam now attack now suppresses. That makes sense to me. Leviathan's Breath. The Leviathan's Breath buff from a few seasons back inadvertently reduced the PvP damage enough that it could no longer one-hit kill players in their super with a headshot. We fixed that, but also added Volatile and increased the damage versus champions substantially to highlight its anti-champion role. Okay, so now applies Volatile on a perfect draw impact. Keep in mind, that means you have to get, it's got to be a perfect draw. I mean, you can't hold it for too long. Increases damage from 396 to 442. This allows it to once again one hit kill all supers in PvP. Mind you, this is for headshots. Don't know about body shots. And then finally, here we go. This is a big one. Increased damage versus champions by 30%. Jeez. That's going to be a hefty hitting bow. I don't know if it's going to be a top option though. Its draw time is incredibly slow. 1000 Voices was briefly a top pick in season 14, but has been eclipsed by other options since then. We wanted to lean even more into a chain of solar explosions by adding Scorch. And with the global heavy weapon changes, it's also a strong option. If you have Ember of Ashes equipped, landing a full burst on a single target will trigger an ignition immediately. Exact results may vary depending on whether other players are also scorching the targets. Okay, so it's changed here. Now, each explosion applies a 10 plus 5 with Ember of Ashes scorch stacks. I'm not sure what the 10 plus 5 means. I don't think it means 15. Sunshot was a top candidate for applying solar subclass verbs. With the explosion, and the explosions are the clear place to add to. Explosions on kill now applies 10 plus 5 scorch stacks. Okay, good buffs to Sunshot. We've kind of been waiting a long time for that to happen. Polaris Lance has always had a burn effect, so it was obvious change to switch this to Scorch. Perfect Fifth shots now apply 40 plus 20 Scorch stacks instead of a custom burn. Interesting. Two-Tailed Fox had tough competition as a heavy exotic weapon, but now it's the only weapon that can apply subclass verb from multiple damage types without extra steps. Okay, so Solar Rocket now applies 60 plus 30 Scorch stacks instead of burn, and the Void Rocket already applies suppress, and the Catalyst completes the trifecta. The Catalyst completes the trifecta. Does this mean, hold on, does this mean that the Two-Tailed Fox is getting a Catalyst that gives it some sort of arc verb? That's pretty exciting. I don't know. We'll have to see when it comes here. But we're going to keep that in mind for sure. Keep that in mind. Okay, Prometheus Lens has utility with its Solar 3.0 rework, but we wanted to give it something more spectacular on kills in addition. So it added the incandescent perk to the Catalyst. Pretty solid change there. Grand Overture's latest buff, increasing the missiles damage by 50%, brought it up plenty. It just needs its blind updated to tie into Arc 3.0. Okay, so switch the Catalyst to use Arc Blind. Okay, so no major changes coming here to Grand Overture. Just changing the blind to now synergize with Arc 3.0. Hipfire reticles. We're starting to experiment with hipfire weapon reticles, conveying more information, and use the Mana Core as a test bed for this. You can expect to see more weapon type or exotic weapon functionality showing up in hipfire reticles in season 21 and beyond. So they added a reticle elements to the Mana Core, showing its current stacks of anti-grav repulsor. Okay, that's pretty nice. Perks. With Strand coming to the game, along with new Strand weapon damage perk, we've updated a couple of older perks. So Osmosis now works with Strand. Elemental Capacitor now has the following effect when using it with a Strand subclass, which is plus 20 airborne effectiveness, plus 25 for the enhanced perk. Rewind rounds will be appearing on more weapons in Lightfall, but was custom built to only work with Vault of Glass weapon sets. So we've tweaked it to be more general purpose. So they rebuilt rewind rounds to work on non-Vault of Glass weapons. Okay, that's pretty sweet. I wonder what kind of weapons we're going to see this on. Eager Edge had some bugs that needed addressing in a previous release. We've now taken the time to do a more complete rework, which also let us reduce or remove most of the restrictions that were in place. So, no longer deactivates when moving faster than 35 meters per second. Okay. Deactivates correctly after single melee swing. Reduce the base lunge distance buff from 2 to 1.8. Reduce the airborne lunge distance penalty from 25 to 20. And the enhanced perk now increases the lunge distance slightly back up to 2. So what I'm gathering here is this is a buff This is overall a buff to this. So if I'm understanding this correctly, when you swing with an eager edge sword, you start moving really, really fast, but then like you kind of hit a cap and you stop moving so fast. I'm thinking that this change right here just makes it so that if you're in the air and you do a swing, you're gonna go full IN. Yep. Okay, blinding grenades on grenade launchers don't do arc damage, so it's not appropriate for them to trigger arc 3.0 blind effects. We didn't feel the need to change their disorienting effect though, so we've updated the name to overlap less. So they've renamed blinding grenades to disorienting grenades. No buffs, no nerfs, they're literally just a name change. Okay, and the Vice Stinger is one of the most desirable origin traits in the game, particularly, but not only, on linear fusion rifles, to the point where it makes it hard for non-Vice weapons to compete. It needed some adjustment. With this change, it's still valuable, but more in line with other origin traits. Okay, so this was typically a full reload when the perk activated. Now it reloads 25% of the magazine. So this is a major nerf for Vice Stinger. This is a huge nerf for Vice Stinger. This means that if you are using what is it, Reed's Regrets with 6 rounds in the magazine and you activate Vice Stinger, you are going to be, instead of getting a full 6, you're only going to be getting like 2, like actually I think 1. If they do round down, you're only going to get 1 round back in the magazine. That's pretty intense. That's a pretty big change. I think that a lot of players are going to be disappointed about it, but the reasons that they gave here make sense. The future, we are already hard at work on season 21 and 22, and some of the changes we're making include adding a full auto melee accessibility setting, which will apply to all forms of melee, a passover weapon type, and exotic hipfire reticles, including increasing how visibly they change even at high FOV, and adding features like charge meters and exotic perk counters. We've also got balance changes in the works, but it's a little too early to get into them. We'll have more information to share post Lightfall. Okay, so yeah, that's gonna kind of cover all these weapon changes. I think some of the big ones here: linear fusion rifles getting a major nerf here. Machine guns getting somewhat of a buff. Also, heavy grenade launchers getting a major buff. And then kinetic weapons getting some big buffs here. Outside of that, couple of some exotics getting basically 3.0 verbs associated with them. I think the biggest one out of all of these is probably going to be Sunshot applying Scorch stacks now. Because Sunshot has always been a great option, but now it's even better. And then of course we have some reworks of some perks here just to update with Strand coming and stuff like that. But yeah, that's it. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, and yeah, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye for now.